Chapter 3 Night of Solamnia, the Old Man's Party. Raceland leaned forward. He and Caramon exchanged glances as thoughts passed wordlessly between them. It was a rare moment, for only great personal difficulty or danger ever made the twins' close kinship apparent. Kitiara was their older half-sister. Kitiara would not break her oath unless another, stronger oath bound her. Raceland spoke their thoughts aloud. What does she say? Caramon asked. Tanis hesitated, then licked his dry lips. Her duties with her new lord keep her busy. She sends her regrets and best wishes to all of us, and her love. Tanis felt his throat constrict. He coughed. Her love to her brothers and to... He paused, then rolled up the parchment. That's all. Love to who? Tessoff asked brightly. Ouch! He glared at Flint, who had trod upon his foot. The Kender saw Tanis flush. Oh, he said, feeling stupid. Do you know who she means? Tanis asked the brothers. What new lord does she talk about? Who knows with Kitiara? Raceland shrugged his shoulders. The last time we saw her was here in the inn 5 years ago. She was going north with Sturm. We have not heard from her since. As for her new lord, I'd say we now know why she broke her oath to us. She has sworn allegiance to another. She is, after all, a mercenary. Yes, Tanis admitted. He slipped the scroll back into the case and looked up at Tika. You say this arrived under strange circumstances. Tell me. A man brought it in late this morning. At least I think it was a man. Tika shivered. He was wrapped head to foot in clothing of every description. I couldn't even see his face. His voice was hiss-like, and he spoke with a strange accent. Deliver this to one Tanis half-elven, he said. I told him you weren't here and hadn't been here for several years. He will be, the man said. Then he left. Tika shrugged. That's all I can tell you. The old man over there saw him. She gestured to an old man sitting in a chair before the fire. You might ask him if he noticed anything else. Tanis turned to look at an old man who was telling stories to a dreamy-eyed child staring into the flames. Flint touched his arm. Here comes the one who can tell you more, the dwarf said. Sturm, Tanis said warmly, turning toward the door. Everyone except Raceland turned. The mage relapsed into the shadows once more. At the door stood a straight-backed figure dressed in full plate armor and chainmail, the symbol of the Order of the Rose on the breastplate. A great many people in the end turned to stare, scowling. The man was a Solamnic knight, and the knights of Solamnia had fallen into ill repute up north. Rumors of their corruption had spread even this far south. The few who'd recognized Sturm as a long-time former resident of Solus shrugged and turned back to their drinking. Those who did not continued to stare. In these days of peace, it was unusual enough to see a knight in full armor enter the inn. But it was still more unusual to see a knight in full armor that dated back practically to the Cataclysm. Sturm received the stares as accolades due to his rank. He carefully smoothed his great thick mustaches, which, being the age-old symbol of the knights, were as obsolete as his armor. He bore the trappings of the Solmanic knight with unquestioned pride, and he had his sword arm and the skill to defend that pride. Although people in the inn stared, no one, after one look at the knight's calm, cold eyes, dared snicker or make a derogatory comment. The knight held the door open for a tall man and a woman heavily cloaked in furs. The woman must have spoken a word of thanks to Sturm, for he bowed to her in a curtly, old-fashioned manner, long dead in the modern world. Look at that, Caramon said, his head in admiration. The gallant knight helps the fair lady. I wonder where he dragged up those two. They're barbarians from the plains, said Taz, standing on a chair, waving his arms to his friend. That's the dress of the Kyushu tribe. Apparently, the two plainsmen declined any offer Sturm made, for the knight bowed again and left them. He walked across the crowded inn with a proud and noble air, such as he might have worn walking forward to be knighted by the king. Tanis rose to his feet. Sturm came to him first and threw his arms around his friend. Tanis gripped him tightly, feeling the knight's strong, puny arms clasp him in affection. Then the two stood back to look at each other for a brief moment. Sturm hasn't changed, Tanis thought, except that there are more lines around the sad eyes, more gray in the brown hair. The cloak is a little more frayed. There are a few more dents in the ancient armor, but the knight's flowing mustaches, his pride and joy, were as long and sweeping as ever. His shield was polished just as brightly. His brown eyes were just as warm when he saw his friends. And you have a beard, Sturm said with amusement. Then the knight turned to greet Caramon and Flint. Tassov dashed off after more ale, Tiga having been called away to serve others in the growing crowd. Greetings, knight, whispered Raceland from the corner. Sturm's face grew solemn as he turned to greet the other twin. Raceland, he said. The mage drew back his hood, letting the light fall on his face. Sturm was too well bred to let his astonishment show beyond a slight explanation. But his eyes widened. Tanis realized the young mage was getting a cynical pleasure out of seeing his friend's discomfort. Can I get you something, Raceland? Tanis asked. No, thank you, the mage answered, moving into the shadows once again. He eats practically nothing, Caramon said in a worried tone. I think he lives on air.
Some plants live on air,
Tassov stated, returning with Sturm's ale.
I've seen them. They hover over the ground, their roots suck food and water out of the atmosphere.
Really? Caramon's eyes were wide. I don't know who's the greater idiot, said Flint in disgust. Well, we're all here. What news? All. Sturm looked at Tanis questioningly. Kitiara? Not coming, Tanis replied steadily. We were hoping perhaps you could tell us something. Not I. The knight frowned. We traveled north together and parted soon after crossing the sea narrows into old Solamnia. She was going to look up relatives of her father, she said. That was the last I saw of her. Well, I suppose that's that, Tanis sighed. What of your relatives, Sturm? Did you find your father? Sturm began to talk, but Tanis only half listened to Sturm's tale of his travels in his ancestral land of Solamnia. Tanis' thoughts were on Kitiara. Of all his friends, she had been the one he most longed to see. After 5 years of trying to get her dark eyes and crooked smile out of his mind, he discovered that his longing for her grew daily. Wild, impetuous, hot-tempered, swordswoman was everything Tanis was not. She was also human. A love between human and elf always ended in tragedy. Yet, Tanis could no more get Kitiara out of his heart than he could get his human half out of his blood. Wrenching his mind free of memories, he began listening to Sturm. I heard rumors. Some say my father is dead. Some say he's alive. His face darkened. But no one knows where he is. Your inheritance? Caramon asked. Sturm smiled, a melancholy smile that softened the lines in his proud face. I wear it, he replied simply. My armor and my weapon. Tanis looked down to see that the knight wore a splendid, if old-fashioned, two-handed sword. Caramon stood up to peer over the table. That's a beauty, he said. They don't make them like that these days. My sword broke in a fight with an ogre. Theros Ironfield put a new blade on it today, but it cost me dearly. So, you're a knight now? Sturm's smile vanished. Ignoring the question, he caressed the hilt of his sword lovingly. According to the legend, the sword will break only if I do, he said. It was all that was left of my father's. Suddenly, Tass, who hadn't been listening, interrupted. Who are those people? The Kender asked in a shrill whisper. Tanis looked up as the two barbarians walked past their table, heading for empty chairs that sat in the shadows of a corner near the fire pit. The man was the tallest man Tanis had ever seen. Caramon, at 6 feet, would only come to the man's shoulder, but Caramon's chest was probably twice as big around, his arms 3 times as big. Although the man was bundled with the furs barbarian tribesmen live in, it was obvious that he was thin for his great height. His face, though dark-skinned, had a pale cast of one who had been ill or suffering greatly. His companion, the woman Sturm had bowed to, was so muffled in fur-trimmed cape and hood that it was difficult to tell much about her. Neither she nor her tall escort glanced at Sturm as they passed. The woman carried a plain staff trimmed with feathers in a barbaric fashion. The man carried a well-worn knapsack. They sat down on the chairs, huddled in their cloaks, and talked together in low voices. I found them wandering on the road outside town, Sturm said. The woman appeared near exhaustion, the man just as bad. I brought them here, told them that they could get food and rest for the night. They are proud people, and would have refused my help, I think, but they were lost and tired. Sturm lowered his voice. There are things on the road these days that is better not to face in the dark. We met some of them, asking about a staff, Tanis said grimly. He described their encounter with Few Master Toad. Although Sturm smiled at the description of the battle, he shook his head. A secret guard questioned me about a staff outside, he said. Blue crystal, wasn't it? Caramon nodded and put his hand on his brother's thin arm. One of the slimy guards stopped us, the warrior said. They were going to impound Race's staff, if you'll believe that, for further investigation, they said. I rattled my sword at them and they thought better of the notion. Raceland moved his arm from his brother's touch, a scornful smile on his lips. What would have happened if they had taken your staff? Tanis asked Raceland. The mage looked at him from the shadows of his hood, his golden eyes gleaming. They would have died horribly, the mage whispered, and not by my brother's sword. The half-elf felt chilled. The mage's softly spoken words were more frightening than his brother's bravado. I wonder what is so important about a blue crystal staff. The goblins would kill to get it, Tanis mused. There are rumors of worse to come, Sturm said quietly. His friends moved closer to hear him. Armies are gathering in the north, armies of strange creatures, not human. There is talk of war. But what? Who? Tanis asked. I've heard the same. As have I, Caramon added. In fact, I heard. As the conversation continued, Tasselhoff yawned and turned away. Easily bored, the Kender looked around the inn for some new amusement. His eyes went to the old man still spinning tales for the child by the fire. The old man had a larger audience now. The two barbarians were listening, Tass noted. Then his jaw dropped. The woman had thrown her hood back, and the firelight shone on her face and hair. The Kender stared in admiration. The woman's face was like the face of a marble statue, classic, pure, cold. But it was her hair that captured the Kender's attention. Tass had never before seen such hair, especially on the plainsmen, who were usually dark-haired and dark-skinned. No jeweler spinning molten strands of silver and gold could have created the effect of this woman's silver-gold hair shining in the firelight. One other person listened to the old man. There was a man dressed in rich brown and golden robes of a seeker. He sat at a small, round table drinking mulled wine. Several mugs stood empty before him, and even the Kender watch he called sourly for another. That's Hederic, Tika whispered as she passed the companion's table. The high theocrat. The man called out again, glaring at Tika. She bustled quickly over to help him. He snarled at her, mentioning poor service. She seemed to start to answer sharply, then bit her lip and kept silent. The old man came to the end of his tale. The boy sighed.
Are all your stories of the ancient gods true, old one?
He asked curiously. Tasselhoff saw Hederic frown. Kender hoped he wouldn't bother the old man. Tass touched Tanis's arm to catch his attention, nodding his head toward the seeker with a look that meant that there might be trouble. The friends turned. All were immediately overwhelmed by the beauty of the plainswoman. They stared in silence. The old man's voice carried clearly over the drone of the other conversations in the common room. Indeed, my stories are true, child. The old man looked directly at the woman and her tall escort. Ask these two. They carry such stories in their hearts.
Do you?
The boy turned towards the woman eagerly.
Can you tell me a story?
The woman shrank back into the shadows, her face filled with alarm as she noticed Tanis and her friend staring at her. The man drew near her protectively, his hand reaching for his weapon. He glowered at the group, especially the heavily armored Caramon. Nervous bastard, Caramon commented, his hand straying to his own sword. I can understand why, Sturm said. Guarding such a treasure, he is her bodyguard, by the way. I gathered from their conversation that she's some kind of royal person in their tribe, though I imagine, from the looks they exchanged, that their relationship goes a bit deeper than that. The woman raised her hand in a gesture of protest. I'm sorry. The friends had to strain to hear her low voice. I am not a teller of tales. I have not the art. She spoke the common tongue, her accent thick. The child's eager face filled with disappointment. The old man patted him on the back, then looked directly into the woman's eyes. You may not be a teller of tales, he said, but you are a singer of songs. Aren't you, chieftain's daughter? Sing the child your song, Goldmoon. You know the one. From out of nowhere, apparently a lute appeared in the old man's hands. He gave it to the woman, who stared at him in fear and astonishment. How do you know me, sir? She asked. That is not important, the old man smiled gently. Sing for us, chieftain's daughter. The woman took the lute with her hands that trembled visibly. Her companion seemed to make a whispered protest, but she did not hear him. Her eyes were held fast by the glittering black eyes of the old man. Slowly, as if in a trance, she began to strum the lute. As the melancholy chords drifted through the common room, conversation ceased. Soon, everyone was watching her, but she did not notice. Goldmoon sang the song for the old man alone. The grasslands are endless, and summer sings on, and Goldmoon the princess loves a poor man's son. Her father the chieftain makes long roads between them. The grasslands are endless, and the summer sings on. The grasslands are waving, the sky's rim is gray. The chieftain sends Riverwind east and away to search for magic at the lip of the morning. The grasslands are waving, the sky's rim is gray. O Riverwind, where have you gone? O Riverwind, autumn comes on. I sit by the river and look to the sunrise, but the sun rises over the mountains alone. The grasslands are fading, the summer wind dies. He comes back, the darkness of stone in his eyes. He carries a blue staff as bright as a glacier. The grasslands are fading, the summer wind dies. The grasslands are fragile, as yellow as flame. The chieftain makes mockery of Riverwind's claim. He orders the people to stone the young warrior. The grasslands are fragile, as yellow as flame. The grassland has faded, the autumn is here. The girl joins her lover, and the stones whistle near. The staff flares in blue light, and both of them vanish. The grasslands are faded, and autumn is here. There was a heavy silence in the room as her hand struck the final chord. Taking a deep breath, she handed the lute back to the old man and withdrew into the shadows once more. "Thank you, my dear," the old man said, smiling.
Now can I have a story?
The little boy asked wistfully. "Of course," the old man answered and settled back into his chair. "Once upon a time, the great god Paladine—"
Paladine?
The child interrupted.
I've never heard of a god named Paladine.
Snorting came from the high theocrat sitting at a nearby table. Tanis looked at Hederic, whose face was flushed and scowling. The old man appeared not to notice. "Paladine is one of the ancient gods, child. No one has worshipped him for a long time."
Why did he leave?
The boy asked. "He did not leave us," the old man answered, and his smile grew sad. "Men left him after the dark days of the Cataclysm. They blamed the destruction of the world on the gods instead of themselves, as they should have done. Have you ever heard the tentacle of the dragon?"
Oh, yes,
the boy said eagerly.
I love stories about dragons, though Papa says dragons never existed. I believe in them, though. I hope to see one someday.
The old man's face seemed to age and grow sorrowful. He stroked the young boy's hair. "Be careful what you wish for, my child," he said softly. Then he fell silent. "The story," the boy prompted. "Oh, yes. Well, once upon a time, Paladin heard the prayer of a very great knight, Huma."
Yuma from the Canticle?
Ah, yes, that's the one. Huma became lost in the forest. He wandered and wandered until he despaired because he thought he would never see his homeland again. He prayed to Paladin for help, and there suddenly appeared before him a white stag.
Did Huma shoot it?
The boy asked. He started to, but his heart failed him. He could not shoot an animal so magnificent. The stag bounded away, then it stopped and looked back at him as if waiting. Huma began to follow it. Day and night he followed the stag until it led to his homeland. He offered thanks to the god Paladin. "Blasphemy!" snarled a voice loudly. A chair crashed back. Hannes put down his mug of ale, looking up. Everyone at the table stopped drinking to watch the drunken theocrat. "Blasphemy!" Hederic weaved unsteadily on his feet, pointing at the old man. "Heretic! Corrupting our youth! I'll bring you before the council, old man!" The seeker fell back a step, then staggered forward again. He looked around the room with a pompous air. "Call the guards!" He made a grandiose gesture. "Have them arrest this man and this woman singing lewd songs, obviously a witch. I'll confiscate the staff." The seeker lurched across the floor to the barbarian woman who was staring at him in disgust. He reached clumsily for her staff. "No," the woman called Goldmoon spoke coolly. "This staff is mine. You cannot take it." "Witch!" the seeker sneered. "I am the high theocrat. I take what I want." He started to make another grab for the staff. The woman's tall companion rose to his feet. "The chieftain's daughter says you will not take it," the man said harshly. He shoved the seeker backward. The tall man's push was not rough, but it knocked the drunken theocrat completely off balance. His arms flailing wildly as he tried to catch himself, he lurched forward too far, tripped over his official robes, and fell headfirst into the roaring fire. There was a whoosh of flare and light, then sickening smell of burning flesh. The Theocrat's screams tore through the stunned silence as the crazed man leapt to his feet and started whirling around in a frenzy. He became a living torch. Tanis and the others sat, unable to move, paralyzed with the shock of the incident. Only Taslov had the wits enough to run forward, anxious to try to help the man. But the Theocrat was screaming and waving his arms, fanning the flames that were consuming his clothes and his body. There seemed to be no way that the little Kender could help him. "Here!" The old man grabbed the barbarian's feathered decorated staff and handed it to the Kender. "Knock him down, then smother the fire." Taslov took the staff, swung it, using all his strength, and hit the Theocrat squarely in the chest. The man fell to the ground and there was a gasp from the crowd. Taslov himself stood, open-mouthed, the staff clutched in his hand, staring down at the amazing sight at his feet. The flames had died instantly. The man's robes were whole, undamaged. His skin was pink and healthy. He sat up, a look of fear and awe on his face. He stared down at his hands and his robes. There was not a mark on his skin. There was not even the smallest cinder smoking on his robes. "It healed him," the old man proclaimed loudly. "The staff! Look at the staff!" Hasselhoff's eyes went to the staff in his hands. It was made of a blue crystal and was glowing with a bright blue light. The old man began shouting, "Call the guards! Arrest the Kender! Arrest the barbarians! Arrest his friends! I saw them come in with the knight!" He pointed to Sturm. "What?" Tanis leapt up. "Are you crazy, old man?" "Call the guards!" The words had spread. "Did you see? The blue crystal staff! We found it! Now they'll leave us alone! Call the guards!" The Theocrat staggered to his feet, his face pale, blotched with red. The barbarian woman and her companions stood up, fear and alarm in their faces. "Foul witch!" Hedric's voice shook with rage. "You have cured me with evil. Even as I burn to purify my flesh, you will burn to purify your soul!" With that, the Seeker reached out, and before anyone could stop him, he plunged his hands back onto the flames. He gagged with the pain, but could not cry out. Then, clutching his charred and blackened hand, he turned and staggered off, though murmuring to the crowd, a wild look of satisfaction on his pain-twisted face. "You've got to get out of here." Tika came running over to Tanis, her breath coming in gasps. "The whole town's been hunting for that staff. Those hooded men told the Theocrat they'd destroy Solus if they caught someone harboring the staff. The townspeople will turn you over to the guards." "But it's not our staff," Tanis protested. He glared at the old man and saw him settle back into the chair, a pleased smile on his face. The old man grinned at Tanis and winked. "Do you think they'll believe you?" Tika wrung her hands. "Look!" Tanis looked around. People were glaring at them balefully. Some took a firm grip of their mugs. Others eased their hands onto the hilts of their swords. Shouts from down below drew his eyes back to his friends. "The guards are coming!" exclaimed Tika. Tanis rose. "We'll have to go out through the kitchen." "Yes," she nodded. "They won't look back there yet. But hurry. It won't take them long to surround the place." Years of being apart had not affected the companions' ability to react as a team to threat of danger. Kermon had pulled on his shining helm, drawn his sword, shouldered his pack, and was helping his brother to his feet. Raceland, his staff in his hand, was moving around the table. Flint had hold of his battle axe and was frowning darkly at the onlookers, who seemed hesitant about rushing to attack such well-armed men. Only Sturm sat, calmly drinking his ale. "Sturm," Tanis said urgently, "come on! We've got to get out of here!" "Run!" The knight appeared astonished. "This rabble?" "Yes." Tanis paused. The knight's code of honor forbade running from danger. He had to convince him. "That man is a religious fanatic, Sturm. He'll probably burn us at the stake." And a sudden thought rescued him. "There is a lady to protect." "The lady, of course." Sturm stood up at once and walked over to the woman. "Madame, your servant." He bowed. The courtly knight would not be hurried. "It seems we are all in this together. Your staff has placed us in considerable danger. You, most of all. We are familiar with the area around here. We grew up here. You, I know, are strangers. We would be honored to accompany you and your gallant friend and guard your lives." "Come on," Tika urged, tugging on Tanis's arm. Kermon and Raceland were already at the kitchen door. "Get the Kender," Tanis told her. Tasselhoff stood, rooted to the floor, staring at the staff. It was rapidly fading back to a nondescript brown color. Tika grabbed Tas by the top knot and pulled him toward the kitchen. The Kender shrieked, dropping the staff. Goldmoon swiftly picked it up, clutching it close to her. Although frightened, her eyes were clear and steady as she looked at Sturm and Tanis. She was apparently thinking rapidly. Her companion said a harsh word in their language. She shook her head. He frowned and made a slashing motion with his hand. She snapped a quick reply, and he fell silent, his face dark. "We will go with you," Goldmoon said to Sturm in the common tongue. "Thank you for the offer." "This way!" Tanis herded them out through the swinging kitchen doors. He glanced behind him and saw some of the crowd move forward, but in no great hurry. The cook stared at them as they ran through the kitchen. Caramon and Raceland were already at the exit, which was nothing more than just a hole cut in the floor. A rope hung from a sturdy limb above the hole and dropped 40 feet to the ground.
Ah!
Exclaimed Tass, laughing.
Here the ale comes up and the garbage goes down.
He swung out onto the rope and shimmied down easily. "I'm sorry about this," Tika apologized to Goldmoon, "but it is the only way out of here. I can climb down a rope." Then the woman smiled and added, "Though I admit, it has been many years." She handed her staff to her companion and grasped the stout rope. She began to descend, moving skillfully hand over hand. When she reached the bottom, her companion tossed the staff down, swung on the rope, and dropped through the hole. "How are you going to get back down, Raced?" Caramon asked, his face lined with concern. "I can carry you on my back." Raceland's eyes flashed with an anger that startled Tanis. "I can get down myself," the mage hissed. Before anyone could stop him, he stepped onto the edge of the hole and leapt out into the air. Everyone gasped and peered down, expecting to see Raceland splattered all over the ground. Instead, they saw the young mage gently floating down, his robes fluttering around him. The crystal on his staff glowed brightly. "He shivers my skin," Flint growled to Tanis. "Hurry!" Tanis shoved the dwarf forward. Flint grabbed hold of the rope. Caramon followed, the big man's weight causing the limb the rope was tied around to creak. "I will go last," Sturm said, his sword drawn. Very well. Tanis knew it was useless to argue. He slung the longbow and quiver of arrows over his shoulder, grabbed the rope, and started down. Suddenly, his hand slipped. He slid down the rope, unable to stop it, tearing the skin off his palms. He landed on the ground and looked, wincing at his hands. His palms were raw and bleeding. But there was no time to think about them. Glancing up, he watched as Sturm descended. Tika's face appeared in the opening. "Go to my house," she mouthed, pointing through the trees. Then she was gone.
"I know the way,"
Tasslehoff said, his eyes glowing with excitement.
"Follow me."
They hurried off after the tender, hearing the sounds of the guards climbing the stairway into the inn. Tanis, unused to walking on the ground in Souls, was soon lost. Above him he could see the bridge walks, the street lamps gleaming among the tree leaves. He was completely disoriented, but Tass kept pushing forward confidently, weaving in and out among the huge trunks of the Valenwood trees. The sounds of the commotion at the inn faded. "We'll hide at Tika's for the night," Tanis whispered to Sturm as they plunged through the underbrush, "just in case someone recognizes us and decides to search our homes. Everyone will have forgotten about this by the morning. We'll take the plainsmen to my house and let them rest a few days. Then we can send the barbarians on to Haven, where the Council of High Seekers can talk to them. I think I might even go along. I'm curious about this staff." Sturm nodded. Then he looked at Tanis and smiled his rare, melancholy smile. "Welcome home," the knight said. "Same to you," the half-elf grinned. They both came to a sudden halt, bumping into Caramon in the dark. "We're here, I think," Caramon said. In the light of the street lamps that hung in the tree limbs, they could see Tasslehoff climbing tree branches like a gully dwarf. The rest followed more slowly, Caramon assisting his brother. Tanis, gritting his teeth from the pain in his hands, climbed up slowly through the rapidly thinning autumn foliage. Tass pulled himself up over the porch railing with the skill of a burglar. The Kender slipped over to the door and peered up and down the bridge walk. Seeing no one on it, he motioned to the others. Then he studied the lock and smiled to himself in satisfaction. The Kender slid something out of his pockets. Within seconds, the door of Tika's house swung open. "Come in," he said, playing host. They crowded inside the little house, the tall barbarian being forced to duck his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. Tass pulled the curtains shut. Sturm found a chair for the lady, and the tall barbarian went to stand behind her. Raceland stirred up the fire. "Keep watch," Tanis said. Caramon nodded. The warrior had already posted himself at a window, staring out into the darkness. The light from the street lamp gleamed through the curtains into a room, casting dark shadows on the walls. For long moments no one spoke, each staring at the others. Tanis sat down. His eyes turned to the woman. "The blue crystal staff," he said quietly. "It healed that man. How?" "I don't know," she faltered. I haven't had it very long." Tanis looked down at his hands. They were bleeding from where the rope had peeled off his skin. He held them out to her. Slowly, her face pale, the woman touched him with the staff. It began to glow blue. Tanis felt a slight shock tingle through his body. Even as he watched, The blood on his palms vanished. The skin became smooth and unscarred. True healing, he said in awe.